scrap iron that we sold the Japanese before World War II. We're not going to like the form that a lot of that comes back to us at with a lot of these countries that have oil in the Middle East that are not our friends. It's a terrible situation, and it is one that is accumulated as a result of too many politicians going to Washington and wanting to make promises and come home and campaign on, well, I'm a compassionate guy. See, I just passed this big bill to expand government to go help all these folks over here who certainly need the help. But our first obligation is to take care of our kids and our grandkids and guarantee that we're leaving the country, we're leaving the nation to them that's better than we inherited ourselves. We treat the national treasury as though it's somebody else's. And it's a terrible thing to do to our kids. And right now the comptroller says we have 5 to 10 years to deal with it. And I got to let that sink in. We have 5 years, 10 years tops, he says probably 5, in order to get our financial house in order, or we will go right off a cliff like Thelma and Louise, the United States of America. And it is that severe. Nobody will tell you that. Now, I shocked you with that today. Go to GAO.gov. You'll find it on my website as well. You'll actually see a one-page letter that I got the comptroller to give me to explain all this in a single letter. How terrible the problem is that we face as a nation, and how serious and dangerous the situation is. That's what makes it even more important how important this election is. How important everybody you know ought to get out and register to vote, no matter how they vote. They just get out and register to vote and vote this November. And if you go to the GAO's website, look up the Fiscal Responsibility Tour and walk through it, and you'll see that, and it grieves me to say it, but over that $54 trillion unfunded liability grew by 158% over the last 7 years, since 2000. And that's why I've had to vote no so much. And I love our president and support him and help him every way I can. But I wasn't elected to go grow the government. I voted against No Child Left Behind. I voted against both farm bills. I voted against the Medicare prescription drug bill. Voted against the AIDS in Africa bill. Do you know Congress has created, and nobody even knows this, that AIDS in Africa bill, noble, worthwhile thing to try to stop AIDS around the world? But what nobody's telling you is that bill, by law, for the first time in our history, created an entitlement program for anybody living in the third world. If you have AIDS or malaria or tuberculosis and you live in a third world country, under that bill, which the president has signed, you have an open-ended entitlement to $1,200 a year worth of medication at at Caroline, Virginia Culberson's expense, at our kids' expense. And that's why I voted against it. I mean, it is appalling to see what's been done to the United States Treasury. Do you know the Democrats passed a bill in the House to create a national wind insurance program? The national flood insurance program? They set up a deal now where you and I, the taxpayers, my daughter, your kids, are the insurance company of last resort for wind insurance. Now, I'm horrified you with all that because the knot will untie itself. It'll untie itself if we follow Mr. Jefferson's core principles. And it is important to remember that we're Texans and we're Americans, and there's no problem we cannot solve if we see it. The only people that drown in a hurricane are the ones that don't see it coming. When you can see it on the satellite and you can see it on the radar and you analyze it and you think about it intelligently, you can deal with it. And we can deal with this problem as we have with so many others. So just take a deep breath, as bad as all that is, and let me walk you through very quickly, as I can, the solution. Because the solution is one that our founding fathers, in particular Thomas Jefferson, gave us. We've got all the tools we need. They are right there. And it is all rooted in the core concept that Mr. Jefferson believed in, as our founders believed in, but he really, in my mind, exemplified better than anybody else, that the solution, again, he said, if you apply core Republican principles, the knot will untie itself. Well, what did he mean by core Republican principles? He laid them out in his first inaugural address, which is a beautiful speech that I really encourage you to read. I try to read it on the House floor at or around his birthday. And he laid out in there the core principles that guided him, he said, that guided the revolution. And he listed, I always thought it was interesting, he listed number 1 was equal justice. Number 2 was world peace and free trade. And then number 3, he said, was that the federal government should focus on, he said, the support of the state governments in all of their rights as the most competent administrators of our domestic concerns and the surest bulwarks against anti-Republican tendencies. And what he meant by that was a focus on the separation of powers between the federal government's role, the state government's role, and then even more importantly, that the government should always protect our individual liberty. And that anything that he described, he always said that if you could see it, you should control it. If it was whether it was we, all of us as free people, given liberty from the hand of God, had the absolute right that was never taken away from us to protect ourselves, our families, to control our home. Our home is our castle. You have absolute right to privacy and individual freedom within your home and with your family. That you have absolute control, Mr. Jefferson believed, as I do passionately, that we should control. I want the government to stay out of my life, stay away from my home, my kids, my church, my bank account, my gun case. Leave me, my business, just leave me alone and we'll do just fine. Let Texans run Texas, fundamentally, is what republicanism with a small r meant to Thomas Jefferson and the founders. And the reason we've got this $54 trillion unfunded liability is that Washington, D.C. has been busily transferring power away from you and I as individuals, away from the local governments, away from state government, and with this idea to solve all the problems in Washington, primarily to make a good press release. Now I say that because I've really had, I've been educated on this over the last 7 years. Do you know that there's actually a standing bet among members of the Legislative Council, the lawyers that draft? I'm a lawyer by training myself, and it has been a real help to me to try to read these opaque federal statutes that are written by, there's a talented group of lawyers, they're called the Legislative Council. And if you get an idea for a bill, what happens is you literally just pick up the phone and you call one of the lawyers and down there, and they have different lawyers that specialize in different areas of the law, like, transportation or foreign affairs or whatever it is. You call them up and you say, I have a great idea for a bill. And you tell them what the idea is, and then they write it up in legalese, and then you file the bill. The Legislative Council has been around for I don't know how long, but they have a standing bet that nobody has ever won, that if the first lawyer down there that can find a bill that is passed into law that does what the press release says wins the bet. It's that screwed up. There's such a disconnect between what is, it is as though we're literally driven by PR. And it's a terrible thing for the country. And frankly, I believe you ought to just have Congress shut down. You ought to have sessions like we do in Austin, where Congress is only there for a limited period of time. Howard Baker's father was a United States Senator, and he said democracy died in Washington the day they installed air conditioning in the United States Capitol. And I'm a big, big believer in this limited government idea, because really there's also a standing joke when the Texas legislature's in session, nobody's life or property is safe. And really all those roots go back to the origins of Texas, to Mr. Jefferson. You remember in Texas our governor's very weak, that the legislature is very strong, the lieutenant governor is the guy that really drives that all has its roots back in this idea of we don't really trust or believe a central government should be that powerful, and it's a great concept. And in order to solve this $54 trillion liability problem, it requires an immediate, you just have to stop spending money. And here's how, if I could illustrate with the water glasses, how this concept would work. And I've already got legislation filed to do this, but most people, when I show it to them, get so horrified because it requires a radical, you have to absolutely change your whole perspective of how you deal with these problems because they're so huge. The concept of Jeffersonian republicanism and American constitutional law and the solution to this massive problem can be illustrated with these three glasses. If you imagine that this first glass is we the people, and the second glass is Texas, and the third glass is